is episode 136 of the Mindset Game podcast, and I'm your host, James Roberts. I'm a two-time Paralympian, online training and nutrition coach, and owner of James Robert Fitness. Why not check out some of my free content at fitamputee.co.uk/free-resources. Each week on the Mindset Game podcast, we bring you an inspirational athlete, message, or expert talking about human optimization to teach you how to change the perception of your mindset and become 1% better. Make sure to share this with your friends on your Instagram story, on Twitter, or on Facebook. They can find this episode on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere that they listen to podcasts by searching for Mindset Game Podcast. And on today's show, I've got Alistair Patrick Heselton. Alistair is the ambassador for the Durham FA and Every Player Counts campaign, which encourages all disabilities into team building and football. He's also worked with the PFA and Premier League to educate young players on the importance of well-being, fulfilling potential, and no matter how bad things can be, the door to sport and football is not always closed. Alistair shares his experience with young footballers needing guidance after rejection and helping them to succeed in any path they may choose by educating them with life skills. As an athlete mentor for the Dame Kelly Holmes Trust, he is also keen to support people recovering from head trauma, helping them regain their lives.
Live well, have no regrets, and open your eyes.
And if you want to, you can expand that a little bit further if you'd like to.
A little bit further, I think we've just been talking about perception through, through sport, not just Paralympic sport, but through sport, and what it can do, and the guys that it can take. And I say just keep on top of yourself and keep open to everything.
Take a screenshot and tag at APH_inspired and at James O. Roberts 11. Without further ado, let's get into today's show. Alistair.
How you doing, James?
I'm not too bad. Obviously, you and I were teammates, so to speak, in London 2012. But for the listeners that don't know much about you, can you give a brief explanation as to how you got involved in sport and how you kind of progressed on to doing your inspirational speaking and being an athlete mentor?
Yeah, well, funny enough, my step into sport was obviously, like most youngsters, I had that dream of what I wanted to do. And for me, it was football as a youngster. And, through all the hard work and training and sheer enjoyment of it, I managed to progress. Went on to sign for QPR when I left school, and I had that great time as a pro footballer. Then had a couple of loan moves and things like that, but then a couple of devastating injuries along the way. The tragic one, which actually then led to me becoming a Paralympic athlete, was being a passenger in my friend's car crash back in 2006. Both going through the windscreen, and spent some time comaed and everything else. Upon recovery, football was completely written off for me. I didn't even know about the Paralympic pathway at the time, but it was just like years later on the off chance. It was my friend, he was the ex-Watford footballer. The Watford doctor actually had become the England cerebral palsy doctor, and he kind of put two and two together and asked the FA, or let the FA know that I would be eligible to play in the side. And then got a call from the FA, and then, sort of a double-edged sword, because what led to me becoming a mentor was actually a bit of me didn't actually want to play football again, but I then got paired with the Jaguar Academy of Sport, and amongst the bursary that I got, I did get mentoring from some famous sports people, one of them being Dame Kelly Holmes, and she really spent a lot of time with me and really just showed me what it was and what it all meant to me again. And I didn't actually think, why should I turn my back on football? I know it was put to one side, but maybe I could give it a go in the new guys, and went for it really. And it was only through that, and obviously having the successful England campaigns and things, scoring on my debut for England and things like that, which relit the fire, so to speak. I did London and everything else, but she then asked me to would I like to give back and mentor others for her trust. And it was only upon doing that, it's I really loved doing that, and one thing just led to another, then it kind of snowballed, and just got bigger and bigger, more into it, gained more experience, and then ended up creating my own brand around inspiring and mentoring others. And here we are today. Now I'm lucky enough to be talking to you.
Well, well, we were on the same level to a certain extent, be it London 2012. Out of interest, where did the CP team finish in London? Because obviously,
Again, and
because it's so busy, I think
yeah,
you're so engrossed in your own sport, you kind of
yeah.
forget.
For me, I was very disappointed in terms of the results where we actually finished, because we only finished seventh from eight. And what was the most gut wrenching bit about that was all of our preparation, because you'll know the Paralympic cycle and the training cycle for everything. All of our preparation was so good, right down to our final few camps before everything was just going well. And then there are things that you don't plan for that can happen in any sport, but more so in football a lot of the time, and things that you just didn't see happening occurred. And it's only when in hindsight I look back on it, okay, there are some things that were just you say, well, was not expecting that, but there were some operational errors that went on as well. And I was certainly advised against if I could ever go back and relive that time.
And you talked about obviously you starting out at QPR.
Yeah.
Talk to me about obviously the footballer's mindset having to go from the academy, being loaned out and things like that, becoming kind of the back and flow of it. What actually does that do on your mental state?
Do you know what? For me personally, I don't think it affects my mental state around performance too much. If anything, it just only unsettled me around where I was going to be. But I never took my eye off the ball at the end. But QPR, there were so many things that had gone into into the mix, if you like, at the time, because the club had gone into administration, and that was what because there was a massive turnaround of the staff. And it was Ian Dowie that when he moved to Oldham Athletic, he really wanted to take me up there, so he got me on loan out there. So I was really familiar with him there, and for me, I thought, well, it's just going to be more football in another area, and moved in. I was in digs with a lovely family, and settled in really quickly, and the staff there, fantastic, and it was home from home for me, and settled in very quickly, doing very well very quickly as well. And just as we extended it to the end of the season, literally weeks after that, boom, did the unhappy triads that tore the medial ligament, cruciate ligament, and cartilage came off the bone. So it was, yeah, that's when I'd say I was probably at my lowest mentally, but more so because being still under contract to QPR, you then have to actually go back there. So it's where you were just comfortable, you're now going to somewhere where you'd associate with being maybe less comfortable because you just moved there to find better. You moved elsewhere to find something better. And but then I was back there, and even at that time, there's still a big transition because we had new management coming in there and everything else. So your face is out of the pot, and it just didn't feel so great. And while everything's going on around you, you're still injured, so you can't even show how good you are, So, and added to the mix, we also had Wasps rugby team move in and start sharing our training ground. So there's just a whole new culture shift, personalities, and everything to deal with all at once, I'd say.
And if we go a step further, Alistair, what would your advice be to any young athlete, be it football or rugby, or whereas you could probably relate a little bit in terms of an academy environment?
Yeah.
What would your opinion be for them to either stick it out, be it in one of these big teams,
Yeah.
or to try and maybe challenge themselves and go outside their comfort zone and kind of the ego in a sense with being at a big club and maybe willing to go out on loan to a I won't say in all honesty a lesser club, but in their maybe their perception is a lower league team in, well, not prestige, but in their eyes from
Yeah,
a
no, I
performance
see
standpoint.
what you're saying. Ultimately, you have to think, first of all, I'll say for anything, happiness and enjoyment has to be paramount. Now, you'd have to ask yourself some real questions. And, okay, I'm in this big club, for example, not doing too much, not really making waves. And am I happy here doing that, or could I be happier maybe in the spotlight at a smaller club, actually gaining valuable experience and testing myself? Because make no mistake, the standard jumps from youth team to first team massively. And I don't care what you think if you're in the youth team at, for example, Manchester United, to if you're in youth team at Man United, you'll gain valuable experience being in, say, the first team at a second division club. So don't for 1 minute think that you wouldn't gain anything. But you have to ask yourself, would it make you happy? Like, and you have to always, I think that's what you need to actually search, because you're always going to play better where you're happier, 100%.
But does that come down to, in essence, and this is a blanket statement now, the youth of today having that sense of entitlement? If I'm at a big club, I deserve to be there.
If you're at a big club, you deserve to be there. No, you have to realise why you're there, because there's many factors, like, in sport and in football. Sometimes it can be nothing more than luck, It was just the right place at the right time, and that's why you're there. And you have to always ask yourself, what am I actually doing here? Because it's funny, because we look in the Premiership today, and we look at youth level, and they're players that we'll never go on to hear about, but they're on £1 million a year, being at these big clubs. And okay, maybe they might actually, they could justify that in that they're going to be secure and their families may be secure. However, have they been fulfilled in that time? And those are two very different things. And personally, I could always say, well, what does make you happy? Because for me, I know what it's like to be not so happy, but at the same time doing financially well, and then absolutely buzzing, and you're maybe not doing as financially well, but you're still incredibly happy. And I know which one I would actually choose. So.
And Alistair, out of interest, talk to me about those two differences, and when those have come up, particularly in your lifetime.
Well, first of all, QPR, it was a great time, and because I'd moved to QPR from Wycombe Wanderers, and whilst there, so I was a schoolboy at Wycombe Wanderers, and then just turned up at QPR, a bit of a new kid on the block. However, people have got that buzz around you, because you're doing things people haven't seen, and with that comes expectation. However, you progress very quickly. But then it gets to the stage where factors outside of your control, things start to slow down, and you can be knocking on the door as much as you want, but it's just not quite clicking. And yeah, you then, don't get me wrong, then you're exposed to distraction, because all of a sudden, me wanting to be doing this, playing here, to be doing that, which isn't happening when you're knocking on the door. Well, let me go and find a good time, which all of a sudden is not on the football pitch. And that does literally take your eye off the ball a bit. However, one thing that I did do was move into Oldham, actually, and as you said, moving outside of your comfort zone. Well, wow, for me that was great, because I was just living with a new family, making new friends, and in an area that I didn't know. So I didn't want to be anywhere else apart from in bed and then at training, in bed then at training, in bed at the match, and it was that simple. My focus really came back, and I started progressing massively, just like I did before.
And in the very beginning of the episode, you mentioned your accident.
Yeah.
When did that transpire, and what kind of level of football were you at that particular moment in your life?
Yeah, that was 2006. So that was not long after I'd come back from playing in Holland, because I went out and I was playing for Helmond Sport for a year, and then coming back, I'd signed for Wingate and Finchley, and it was just a semi-pro team which had a very big sort of exposure to getting back in league football. So I was then thinking, okay, that's going to be the right move for me. Me and my best mates were actually playing there again, which was the real draw for me, because playing football with people that I'd grown up playing with, and it was all looking very good. And like I said, the ex-pro Simon Patterson was there as well. So I thought that was a really good move for us. And then it was the summer of September 2006, and Simon had this car crash, and I was a passenger in his car. So both went through the windscreen. Had a friend that was in the back of the car as well, who did survive. He went out the back window, but Simon and I through the windscreen. Simon, unfortunately, passed away at the scene, and then I spent time in a coma. And to me, upon waking up, it was just didn't know where I was. So even when I was hearing various things, I couldn't make head or tail of it, and I didn't even realise just how big it was. And I still hung on to the to the thought that I might be playing football again, at the end of that season, So, however, that quickly got dashed, and then I had to decide upon doing other things. But again, one thing that I did decide for myself was no matter what I was going to do with my life, I was just going to be happy and good at doing it. So that's just what I went in search of, just getting myself better, as good as I could be.
And you also mentioned that it was because of the doctor at Watford that it's
Yeah,
kind of transpired that you got into the Paralympic movement. Do you
yeah.
think it's an element, and you did touch upon it a little bit, that there was an element of luck that the doctor didn't know about you to be able to put you forward
Yeah,
towards that journey?
yeah, definitely. Because again, it was completely out of the blue. I'm talking 4 or 5 years later, and completely gone a different way in your life. And even when I initially got the call and got told about disability football and things like that, I was like, no, that's not me. I've recovered to an extent where I don't think I identify with a disability footballer and these kind of things. And for me, it was a case of first time I said no. The FA kept on a few more times. I was still like, no, I'm not too sure about this. It's not me. And at the time, Paralympic football wasn't exposed to the way it is now. So the only things that I could see at the time on the internet was just amputee football, and I 100% couldn't identify with that. So
Hmm.
I was like, you definitely got the wrong guy. This isn't me. And it was only upon I thought, well, do you know what? They've extended themselves, as in the FA have, and the least I can do is give it a chance. And then, I just found out a bit more from the horse's mouth, so to speak, and then just attended a camp. It was a GB training camp at the time, and what was great about that was I saw the football. I just saw the first time that I'd been playing football again. I just saw how big my deficits were in terms of the me that I used to be, and became very apparent that I could play that football.
And Alistair, talk to me about obviously that initial assumption that you had towards disability sport as opposed to how you perceive it to this day.
Yeah, well, again, I was always just trying to find out where I started into disability sport because generally, people always say, do you know what, I would never have said you're a Paralympian or I don't identify as a Paralympian. And well, so I could, for all the research I was doing, I just couldn't say, I was like, guys, this isn't me. That's not me. I've done all this recovery not to be classed as a disability athlete or to be a Paralympian of any kind. And then we took on a couple of camps and actually saw, okay, well, the guys are getting a run for my money here. And then the more I got into it, and what was really good was I then found myself just to keep up. I found myself just trying to keep up by reverting to what I was doing as a pro footballer, So I then thought, okay, well, then maybe there are aspects of my previous life that will really assist me in this and help me to be better, and maybe something that I could actually give to the sport, in terms of how I could help raise the standard of it, and that's exactly what I did, and for me, it just got better and better.
And then if we go back slightly, Alistair, obviously you had that accident.
Yeah.
How did it how would I word this? How did it affect you from a physical standpoint, and what was the impact on your injury to the significance of you acquiring cerebral palsy? What level is it at? Because obviously I know, well, not your sport inside and out, but I know a little bit more than, say, the general listener.
Yes.
What degree of impairment do you have in relation to the
Yes.
sport, and can you kind of explain that a little
Yeah.
bit?
So I'm going through the windscreen and a compound depressed fractured skull. So when your skull drops, hits the brain and then sends it into hemorrhage. And because of that, basically, upon waking up out of the coma and everything else, and I had basically 95% of the brain was covered in grey matter or scarring, so to speak. And it was real touch and go on, what sort of recovery I was going to make. And then we'd noticed that my left side, certainly left arm, would slow down a little bit. However, subliminally, that was actually aided because I was rehabbing it very early on in that my right shoulder had come out of the socket and got quite a bad wound, and I'm right-handed, so I couldn't actually use it. So initially, when I was trying to write notes for my parents, I'd actually always be using my left hand, and that was a good rehab to the left side. Legs are always very sore, but Like, my main deficits coming through my brain processing power. So my natural balance is completely gone. Like, so my eyes end up seeing where everything is what makes me stand where I am. So that's what my balance naturally is gone, and I was just taking pictures to keep me orientated, sort of thing. So, and because of that, my brain has to try to process that information whilst listening to someone call for the ball, someone push you, the crowd may be saying something, and trying to process a lot of information is something that makes me get a bit annoyed. So let's just say annoyed and fatigued, and then that then leads to certain parts of my body wanting to go in other places and increases my spasticity and things like that.
So you get a little bit of an element of oh gosh, I completely lost my train of thought. In terms of you've gone to like information overload.
Yes, precisely that. And that's it was really bad upon initial stages. I had the 1 minute memory, if anything like that. Like if that was on a good day, so it was short term memory was severely affected because there was a lot of frontal lobe stuff. So.
So we're not like to ever see you on Strictly Come Dancing then.
No, you wouldn't see me. You wouldn't see me on there. X Factor Street. In fact, you just wouldn't see me on reality TV, mate.
Why?
No,
Is it not your cup of tea then?
Not at all. Not by any stretch of the imagination.
Well, that surprises me a little bit, Alistair, because you're thinking, well, you were in the spotlight to some degree with being a footballer,
Yeah.
but is that just not your? It doesn't float your boat, so to speak.
It doesn't float my boat at all because, say, football and reality TV, they are not one and the same. Football's a job. That's how I've always seen it. You're a footballer first, end of story. And whether it's footballers doing all these other things, I can't necessarily say I agree with, but it's like, I see it as football as a job, and that's what you do, and that's why you're a celebrity, if you like. But come on, you're not. You're a footballer.
But how do you differentiate between most people probably could associate sport now become one form or another, just another form of entertainment?
Yeah, well, that's exactly what it is. It is entertainment, and it makes people happy. So I'm all for it. When you think about the nature of team sports generally, you have to look what they've done for society for generations. In that families follow clubs, and it's always you've got families, communities, and it brings people together. And when you look at what 2012 did for the nation, how many people came together for that one. Heroes Parade Day was one of the most amazing things I've ever seen. So it's incredible.
And Alistair, obviously, we were both there.
Yeah.
What was your initial, not apprehension, that's not the right word. What's the word I want to use? Kind of your initial emotions in the lead up to London, because you've never done a games yourself, whereas I can't compare and contrast between what you're feeling and what I felt.
Yeah.
What was that initial feeling like into the run up before you actually got to the village itself?
Yeah, do you know what? For me, because I've sort of seen that sort of I won't say not that quite the same, but I've seen big stadiums and things before, etc., etc. But London for me, that was where I really put my professional head on, because I was so ready for that games in terms of I was ready, and I honestly thought we were going there for a medal. That's that's what I thought it was all about. And getting there and seeing the village and everything else, and it was amazing. It was great to be a part of that. Always had a big smile on my face. But for me, again, I was very much down to business first.
Well, I think for any listener listening to this, I think that's how the British team was through and through. It's you, and this is probably where people get a little bit not annoyed, but surprised when I say, well, I went to 2 games and I've never been to an opening ceremony. But I kind of put it across this way, and you touched upon it. We're there to do a job, not to go for a jolly. Whereas you could probably agree with the statement now. Some of the other countries that might not be the case. They might like the pompous that goes with it as well.
Yeah, well, do you know what? it's like anything in life. I wouldn't feel too right maybe commenting on other countries and other people because I don't necessarily know what they would have had to go through to
Mhm.
actually be there. So for some countries and some people to be there, yeah, do you know what? It might have been all about that because maybe what they would have had to overcome to actually get themselves there. Well, good on you and well done for it. However, me personally, I was actually so thrilled to be there purely because only like years before doctor had I always remember he gave me a choice where he said like you've got 5 years worth of recovery where after 5 years roughly where you get to is kind of when you plateau and kind of stay. So and that was at a point when I was pretty much bedridden, like so for me that was just a big celebration and enjoyment of actually, do you know what, I remember when he gave me that choice nearly 5 years because it was nearly 5 years to the day before opening ceremony because it was we opening ceremony was the August, wasn't it? Was it August or the September? Because I know the games closed the day of like the anniversary, the day of my car accident. So like to actually be there on opening ceremony day, and I just thought, imagine I'd heard what the doctor said and just stayed in bed for those 5 years. Like there'd have been no way I'd have been at an opening ceremony, like representing my country or nation. So for me, it was a great sense of achievement, and I was really happy about that. But hey, do you know what? Sorry, and then I was straight back to business. So we all are there for different reasons. That's the one thing we have to remember. We're there for different reasons, but our goal should always be the same.
And we touched this point off air before we started, Alistair.
Mhm.
What was kind of the driving factor behind you wanting to go beyond London?
For me, there was everything because well, first of all, I still felt I had more to give, because like in terms of performing, I still felt that I would have said that I've been peaking maybe physically at a prime, but then I still had more experience and everything else I would have wanted to give. So that for me was I just wanted it to keep going.
Do you think it's an essence of there was more to, obviously you said that, but there was just a little bit more to give. You had an unfinished business from London with not achieving what you set out personally and as a team to
Yeah.
do.
No, do you know what? And again, I never take it back to being unfinished business because I always think, well, that was the games and end of story. Like, that's done. But all I can do now is, so I'm getting an echo from you, I think. So I'll hear myself first. But I thought, yeah, London was done. Okay, we didn't get what we wanted to do, but I can only try and be fit for the next one. Hopefully, like, we might do better. But again, I can't say we're 100% going to do better. All I can do is prepare myself the way I did for London and be ready to give it my all.
And talk to me and obviously the listeners about what was the idea behind you wanting to walk away from sport, how you did.
And again, that just comes down to at the closing ceremony of London, I was actually talking with Richard Whitehead. And I said to him, do you know, Richard, I'm going to keep myself because I'm going to be 34 by Rio, and that's generally the retirement age for a footballer. I said, I'm going to keep myself as fit and give it everything I can with the England team to hopefully be selected for England. And if selected for GB, I will be there. However, if not, then I think that will be when I retire. And like the way things transpired, we had the intercontinentals afterwards. Funny enough, I'm still recovering now from an injury I picked up in the last game at London 2012, which was a slip disc in my back, which we've only recently found out about how badly it slipped. But upon we had the intercontinentals, which on hindsight, well, it should be scanned and diagnosed then. I shouldn't have done that. But just before those, my lung collapsed and I couldn't fly with 6 I had that time out. And so for me, the challenges didn't just stop straight after London. It was all rosy. We kept up, but then we still had more tournaments. We won the Quad Nations over in Spain. That was England, Tunisia, Portugal, and USA. But we still had good trainings and everything else. We had a change of management again. Continued right up to Rio. Didn't make it to the Worlds. Didn't get selected to the Worlds. there's something what Royal speaking like. There's some politics in there, we'll call it. And then that was obviously the selection tournament for Rio. Was taken off the list just before Rio, so didn't make it there. The one thing that I could do after that was stay true to myself, which was bam, where's my 34th birthday, and call it a day.
And you mentioned that back injury. You make it seem like it's nothing, whereas in essence that's a pretty serious injury. But how did they miss that?
Okay, it happened in the USA. Okay, I took quite a fall and I jarred my back. Just got on, carried on playing. It's absolutely fine. Heroes Parade day straight after, so we're in that whirlwind and just standing upright for hours and hours, waving to the fans. Next day I was nearly paralysed. My back's really hurting and it's fine. Day after that, it got better. Then, generally, lately, it got better. However, the more I trained and played, I started having resistance. So I was like, guys, my back's this. Got physios. Some physios are saying I might have a stress fracture. Some physios are saying I think another physio is pumping things in your head. But long story short is I needed to play. So people are just training me, rubbing my back and making me play. And it wasn't diagnosed the way it should have been. And it's only, like I say, when you come off the cycle and you don't necessarily receive all the medical support that you had, you're a bit more meticulous in who you're going to see and why you're going to see them. And I then ended up having a scan which showed this bulge slip disc, which is grinding on my nerves.
But do you think, Alistair, if you would have been in a tournament back here in the UK, they'd have maybe caught it because you'd have, this is just an assumption now, they'd have sent you over to EAS, wherever it would have been in the UK, to get it scanned?
Yeah, again, in hindsight, I think it should have been scanned almost like upon the complaint from me saying, but then there's, it goes a bit both ways, because when a physio says to you, no, maybe you just rub this, and then because the physio said you're right, and then you do actually run and perform as though there's nothing wrong, maybe that's a bit me being a little bit weak or naive and thinking, well, I am alright, maybe I should have been a bit more forceful with it, but sometimes you don't want to rock a boat.
Well, I think I think we are, how one of my guests put it a few weeks ago, you've got that little element of, and I questioned it a little bit, you've got a little thin layer of confidence, so if it is kind of hit, an athlete takes a little bit longer to rebuff, and I was like, well, I would have said I was fairly thick-skinned as an athlete. I'd say more now as I'm retired, things of that nature would probably hit me harder, and I'll go a little bit deeper than that and say, talking to my family, because we had, and you probably could agree with this statement or disagree, because you have all that support network in place as an athlete, be it physio, doctor, nutritionist, psychologist, you name it, you get signposted to the right person, and they give you what the symptom is. This is what we're going to do protocol wise. Obviously, go away and do it. Whereas I think when you get out in the real world and you've got to do it for yourself, you've got all those kind of elements of doubt running in the back of your mind, or your head's overthinking things at times, thinking, because I've got to do that thought process for myself. It's more difficult. But I don't know necessarily if you agree with that or disagree.
No, I think I'm a bit more the other way, maybe, because primarily, like, you know, before football, before Paralympics, before anything, I'm a human being. I'm someone that wants to fight myself. And if necessarily the support network I'm given isn't doing what I feel they need to do for me, then I will take it upon myself to actually go and seek the help that I need. I'm always, like, you know, very good with these things, and at the same time, being an ex-footballer, the PFA is part of our union, Remember for Life, and they've always been very supportive, and they've always been able to provide the people that I would need, but then it's for me to go and say who I need and things like that. So, but I've gone in search of everyone. I've been looking at a chiropractor, which in hindsight was a waste of time, and then, like, you know, eventually I got it scanned and everything. I saw what was wrong and then got put in the right hands. So now I'm doing well with it. However, I think, going back to it, as I said, me being a little bit too naive, I think when I didn't felt something was wrong, I do feel that the network around me, their agenda was maybe slightly different in that they still wanted to, what's the word? Achieve certain things by certain times, which wouldn't have been conducive to me being in the hands of whichever process to try and find out what was wrong before we then even started to treat what could have been a more lengthy injury.
And my next question for you, Alistair, would be, in your opinion, how can the general populace change their mindset by 1%?
How can the general public change their mind by 1%?
Or how would you do it?
Well, the only way I changed my mind was by actually opening my eyes, and exposing myself to it more. And like they always say, the old saying, which I don't necessarily agree with, knowledge is power. It's a form of power. It's not power in itself, it's a form of power. But all you can do is actually get to know things a bit more. Paralympics now is actually on show more than ever. Watch it, look at it. And I myself was a real culprit of not really watching the Paralympics before, and it's only actually after becoming a Paralympian I then researched and understood it a bit more, and now watch it avidly. So I do think, you need to actually just open your eyes to it.
And do you think having that way of thinking would change people's perception of their mindset?
100%. It will certainly give you a lot more appreciation, because one, you will see just how brilliant these Paralympians are, but then you actually can engage yourself and know how good you are, and know how weak you are in certain areas, and then know how to make yourself better. Because purely when you watch Paralympics, you see people that have overcome massive challenges, and even if they haven't performed to the best they actually could, they've actually stepped up to the plate, which is something that we could all do.
And my final question to you before we wrap up the episode, Alistair, if you had to summarize what we've been speaking about today into one sentence for people to take away, what would that be?
You should have briefed me about this at the beginning. If I could summarize, let's say, live well, have no regrets, and open your eyes.
And if you want to, you can expand that a little bit further if you'd like to.
A little bit further. I think we've just been talking about perception through, through sport, not just Paralympic sport, but through sport, and what it can do, and the guys it can take. And I say just keep on top of yourself and keep open to everything.
So once again, Alistair, thanks again for coming on the Mindset Game podcast.
Massive thank you, James.
Oh, the pleasure has been all mine.
It's been awesome.
If you like this episode, please do share it with your friends, and do let Alistair and I know what you thought of the episode by tagging us over on Instagram at APH_inspired and at JamesORoberts11, on Twitter and on Facebook. And again, do check out my free content at fitamputee.co.uk/free-resources. Make sure to check that out. The link will be in the description. You can find all the show notes at mindsetgame.lipsum.com under the category Sports. Once again, thanks for listening, and I'll catch you next time for another episode of the Mindset Game podcast.